Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We are at the Reporters Roundtable looking at some of the top stories of the week. On deck tonight, Amazon takes a hit from DC's top prosecutor over allegations of slighting Black neighborhoods. And how many special elections are in the making in Prince George's County because of some recent political shifts there? President-elect Donald Trump may have to go back to the drawing board for at least one of his top cabinet picks. We're going to talk about shopping and retail thieves across the DMC during this holiday shopping season. My guests are Raul Dennis, publisher and editor of the Prince George's Suite magazine, Reese Colbert, host of the Reese Colbert Show on Sirius XM, and Curtis Crutchfield, former news director of Prince George's Community Television. Thank you all so much for joining the conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So let's first talk about this situation with Amazon. The Attorney General of the District of Columbia, Brian Schwab, announcing a suit against this, can we say, trillion-dollar company, Amazon. He's accusing them of slighting Black neighborhoods with expedited delivery. 2 zip codes, one in Ward 7, one in Ward 8, all of this east of the river. Your thoughts about this, Reese?
Well, unless you're sliding that subscription fee, then you don't need to be sliding the deliverables that come along with it. And so it's very strange, and I dare say it does not sound coincidental that it happens to be the Black neighborhoods that are getting the slower deliveries. And so I think that it is very good that the DC Attorney General is on the job and holding Amazon's feet to the flame, because just because they're a big corporation and everybody relies on Amazon for one thing or another doesn't give them the liberty to cheat Black residents.
Mm-hmm. Raul, your thoughts?
I have to be honest that I believe that this is typical of a lot of what we will be seeing in the near future. I think the climate is shifting to a point where corporations and individuals who have great deals of influence will have the opportunity to operate on their core beliefs. And those core beliefs don't always align with a moral fiber or an ethical standard that we all grew up with. And I suspect that there'll be more of this. But once again, and I always say this, it comes down to what we do as opposed to what they do. They're always going to do something or the other. It's always going to be a challenge. It's how we handle it and how we approach our own economic infrastructures. That's the core of what I think is going to be the long-term solution to all of this.
Curtis?
I have a couple of thoughts.
Sure.
If here in DC, where else is this happening? You're talking about, is it in New York, happening in New York, happening in LA? Where else is this happening? Providing service or not providing service by zip code. I would differ a little bit with what Raul said. I think this has happened before. I can speak of something that happened to a colleague in the mid-1990s. She lived in the Lake Arbor, Mitchellville area. She was going to a service station for emergency service, and she wanted to pay by credit card. But they looked at her address and the zip code. They did not like the zip code, so they wanted cash or a check. They did not want to accept her credit card. So,
wow, that was definitely in the 1990s. Gosh, who's writing checks these days? You know,
right.
But certainly, point well taken. And we should say Amazon has said that this is categorically false, and that the company adjusts operations, including delivery routes and times, solely to protect drivers. On the point of protecting drivers, as we know, crime can happen anywhere, uptown, downtown, around town. But to that point, that phrase, to protect drivers, suggests, at least based on that statement, that something is going on. We don't have to look back too terribly far. For example, you remember more than a year or so ago, August of last year, Ward 8 Councilmember Trayon White talking about, during a press conference, telling residents that if you don't stop stealing, they're going to lose their giant grocery store. That is certainly a real concern. So, Reese, from that perspective, if that is indeed happening with Amazon, that they are concerned about the safety of their drivers, is that a legitimate practice?
Well, certainly. I mean, if it is the truth, then I think it is a reasonable measure to take for the safety of the drivers as well as for the safety of the customers. We have, porch bandits and people who are seeking to prey on the fact that people are getting deliveries at all times of the days. And sometimes you can even get deliveries up until 10 p.m. at night. And so if there is a safety concern, then I think that's a reasonable concern. But I would like to see data and evidence behind that there is disproportionately more of a threat in these areas compared to neighboring areas. Otherwise, it plays on tropes and stereotypes of Black areas being innately more criminal or more dangerous. And so, I think it's reasonable to see the data and evidence behind that, but I'm not going to accept that at face value without seeing that kind of information to support that claim.
And to that point, one of the things that I think is really interesting is that they've not stopped, according to the suit, not stopped delivering. What they've stopped is the expedited service. And, Raul, my question is, if I can't get it quick today because Amazon is allegedly concerned about the safety of the drivers, if that's the concern, what difference does it make whether you get robbed today or tomorrow?
Well, let me clarify a point that I made earlier. I didn't mean to imply that people of color or Black folk are responsible for Amazon's decision, or that the risk is higher because of our actions. That's not what I was saying at all. Mm-hmm. And I'm simply saying that the climate that we are in now as a nation suggests that corporations like Amazon will go ahead and make decisions that don't necessarily have Black communities in their favor. And rightly or wrongly, in fact, most of the time it's going to be wrong that they're making these choices. And I'm simply saying that we have to decide as a community how we address the perpetrators of these decisions, how we're going to respond. And as you know, this all just came out today, so I don't have all the data in front of me. I don't know if it's natural, but I do believe Black folk are routinely discriminated against. And so I don't believe that that's going to change. And whether or not it is expedited service or next day service, in my view, it doesn't matter. We should, if we're paying the same dollar for the goods, we should get the exact same services. End of story.
Right. And let's be clear, I did not mistake your point at all. I think your point is very, very well taken. And even if this is happening in neighborhoods that are also having public safety challenges, no matter the color of the majority of the people in these communities, my point again is, if you cut back on expedited service, Curtis, whether you get it today on Wednesday or you have to wait until Saturday, the same kinds of alleged crimes could happen. And more broadly, listen, this isn't just an Amazon issue. And I'm still trying to come to grips with this. We've had UPS drivers jacked. We've had U.S. mail trucks jacked, which, gosh, this is just kind of where we are these days, you know?
I think with regard to Amazon, how they conduct their business is that's their priority in terms of keeping drivers safe. That's all well and good. But those customers in that zip code area, those 2 zip code areas, they need to be advised, hey, we don't provide expedited service to you anymore. So whether they're paying less or not, customers in those areas need to be notified. And that's the problem. They didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is an allegation of deception where you're still paying. If these allegations are true, you're paying extra for expedited services or services that you are just not getting. Definitely something that we're going to continue to keep an eye on. Speaking of keeping an eye on things, this is the holiday shopping season. And, again, jurisdictions around the DMV, specifically, of course, in the District of Columbia, are ramping up police patrols. There were 2 incidents in Georgetown earlier this week, and there were some other incidents. Just generally speaking, Reese, again, is this where we are? This is the holiday shopping season. Everybody's got to keep their head on a swivel, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's better safe than sorry. We're paying all this money for public safety, so somebody need to be out there patrolling, doing more than giving people parking tickets and lane change tickets. They need to be keeping the residents safe and consumers safe. And I think that it's sad that there are people that are looking to prey on people who are just trying to add an extra little bit of cheer for their families and for their friends in the form of gifts and other holiday shopping. But I think that it's important that these would-be thieves or opportunist people who are going around pulling on people's car doors to see if their cars are unlocked and things like that, they need to be on notice. I'm not a super carceral person, lock them all up kind of person, but I am let these people know that there will be consequences if they do break the law and they violate people, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about violating people, stealing somebody's iPhone or their Jordans or their iPads out of their cars. That's not a survival crime. That's a violation. And there needs to be consequences for that.
There's certainly that phrase quality of life, no matter what the season, certainly comes up. But this holiday season, it just seems, I don't know, Curtis, there is the perception, and then there is, of course, the reality of where we are. Those of us in the news business, we cover, every shooting, every robbery, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that this is about perception for public officials?
I'm not sure. I just read a report the other day. I think we'll talk about this later. There was a homicide near one of the restaurants in Largo. And that report indicated that although that crime was horrendous, violent crime in this area is down, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
This time of year, when people are out shopping, you want to enjoy your relatives, friends, that sort of thing. You want to feel safe and comfortable. But as you said, it's life. You have to keep your head on a swivel. And unfortunately, these sort of things do happen. There's a CVS in my neighborhood, not too far from me, that's closing or has closed just a few days ago. And what I heard, it's not official, but I've heard through some of the employees secondhand that they're closing because of theft, shopping.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, hold on, Raul. I want your opinion on that as well, but we are going to take a quick break. And don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM, channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue at the Reporters Roundtable with a look at some of the top stories of the week. My guests are Reese Colbert, host of the Reese Colbert Show on Sirius XM, Curtis Crutchfield, former news director at Prince George's Community Television, and Raul Dennis, publisher and editor-in-chief of Prince George's Suite magazine. Before the break, Raul, we were talking about holiday crime, perception versus reality, and how public officials are trying to address this, specifically as they are looking at it in the District of Columbia and certainly, I'm sure, over there in Tysons and Fairfax County, there are concerns, as well as in Prince George's, National Harbor, et cetera, et cetera. Your thoughts about where we are?
I agree with both our guests here today. I think the Reese's right on target. These are not necessarily crimes of, I got to make sure I eat. A lot of these things come down to, just the idea that I can, and so I will. You got a lot of smash and grab, Fred Flintstone type stuff going on, where people just bust in with a truck and take stuff. You got a number of things where, people run in, smash and grab on a horde type of activity, and just overwhelm the store owners. I also agree with Curtis that, the crime is down. But for that particular family, it might as well be 100% because their loved one is dead. Mm-hmm. And so in the long run, it's a culture. We've got to change that. I mean, and it can be done. There was a time when smoking was the coolest thing on the planet, and now it's not. And so it can be done. But in the short term, I don't know if it's the politicians. I don't know if we can legislate our way through it fast enough to keep up with smash and grab. I think we have to have our police and law enforcement, as well as our retail shop owners, kind of get smarter about tactics and using the technology to anticipate and be prepared and then thwart a lot of the kinds of crimes that folks are dealing with.
But isn't that a slippery slope? Because, and just between you, me, and the other Black folks in the room, that you mentioned those smash and grab, those gang tactic. And when I say gang, I'm not talking about crews. I'm just talking about crowds of thieves operating all at once, overwhelming a store. And if I'm a merchant, and this is a really, really sensitive issue, but if we see young Black people as perpetrators of these crimes all the time, not putting you on the spot, Raul, but what tactics can we use when we see teenagers, and 2 or 3 coming in, all at once, or even 4 coming in? That's how me and my boys used to roll when we were hanging out in Georgetown. But the thing is, we weren't stealing; we were paying customers. But there were 4 of us all at once. Mm-hmm. And did we get some strange looks?
Were you profiled?
Yeah, the difference was that we were exceptionally and impeccably well dressed, and so we were all casket clean. That was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Which is, so again, how do you ride on? How do you sit on that line, Raul, between Black kids who have money, who are paying and have every right to be indignant if somebody's following them around the store, and others who are scoping the place out for theft?
Right. Well, I'm going to be blunt. I'm not a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
Right. So leading with that, but there are pieces in technology with regard to monitoring, with regard to tagging merchandise with paint and or adjustment substances, tracking devices that allow people to get engaged in trapping some of the people who perpetrate these kinds of crimes.
Inventory
And
control.
I believe that law enforcement has to be a little quicker about identifying the areas where this kind of crime frequents, so that you know how to anticipate. And then I think thirdly, there's nothing wrong with being blunt and strong about trapping people physically once you know you're about to be hit. And again, if I were engaged in law enforcement, or if I were engaged in retail, my attitude would be quite aggressive, because I believe that once you cross the line, doesn't matter what color you are, you got to get dealt with. And so I don't see that as being insensitive to the fact that people of color or whomever they might be, I don't see that way at all. I believe that 90%, and this is something that I got from the DC metro area in covering this area for the past 20 years. In fact, we're doing our 20th anniversary next year. We find that a lot of the young people and a lot of our people who are engaged in awkward or criminal activity are not necessarily in a starvation mode when they're engaged. All right, you got a lot going on with the peer pressure piece. Grand Theft Auto is a big game. You got a lot going on with communication so that they can make these smash and grab moves happen in the first place. These are things that can be anticipated. These are things that can be dealt with before the crime is committed if law enforcement and retail work a little bit closer together, do a little bit more anticipation, up their tactics, and be aggressive about it. I don't see it ending completely. I think ultimately it's a cultural issue. Again, we've got to change the culture, and that can be done. But in the short term, I think you've got to be more aggressive. And at some point, the politicians come into it in terms of developing tougher legislation that get the parents to have to deal with their children, get people engaged in the home who should be engaged in the first place.
Yeah, and look, listen, that's a whole another show, as they say. We've had those conversations before, and we'll continue to have them. I will say, moving on, and I'll start with you, Curtis. When you talk about culture, I'm going to talk about what appears to be, by all reporting, a culture of lack of civility that has led to the death of a community activist, Cornelius. Oh my goodness. Cornelius McDonald, the incident at Jasper's, the reporting and what police are saying is that prior to his death outside of Jasper's in Largo, that there was some kind of argument between him and the suspect, Terrell Bailey, and that the officers who were working security escorted them out. And it eventually led up to McDonald's shooting. Also, the reporting is that they did not know each other. I would submit, and we still don't know, Curtis, about all of the details, but this sounds to me that this could have been something as, you spilled the drink, you stepped on my shoes, something like that, and it led to the death of someone who was working to make the community better. This is heartbreaking.
I would agree. Absolutely. I do understand. I read this morning that he was the activist, civic activist, was actually trying to break up an argument. And then somehow he and the suspect became engaged in an altercation. I've been to that restaurant fairly often. Jasper's, it's a very nice restaurant, but sadly, it's had a history of having unfortunate incidents. So it's a very, very sad situation. Now, two men engaged in an argument, testosterone that rises. Who knows what actually sparked it?
Alcohol is involved too.
Yes. So perhaps one guy's manhood was, questioned. That can raise the temperature. So regardless of what happened or regardless of why, it's a very, very sad situation for the family. And I'm wondering what the ramifications will be in terms of customers coming to Jasper's, whether people will stop coming or refrain from coming for a while until things kind of calm down. But I've been there a lot. It's a nice restaurant, very nice service, good food, that sort of thing. From a business perspective, if you're doing everything right, you have security. I think they had off-duty officers there. If you're doing everything right, and then the customers get into an altercation, what can you do? So,
help me with this, Reese.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Jasper's quite a bit. There's a lot of surveillance. I mean, you see the police light that shows that there's surveillance out there. There's always a police presence in front of Jasper's or around Jasper's. But to Curtis's point, if two people get into an altercation and one person is a depraved human being who is so just unhinged to take the life of another human being over an argument, that's not something that the restaurant can anticipate, particularly if it happens outside of the restaurant. But this is why we can't have nice things. I mean, Jasper's is in a nice Black area. It's patronized by almost entirely Black people. This was a later occurrence. I think I read it was 12:45 a.m. So, we don't want to have our businesses closed down at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock because of violence. We don't want to have our, businesses not want to open up in our neighborhoods, but people don't act right. So it's so tragic and it's so senseless. And the perpetrator, if it's this person or somebody else, I hope that they're held to the fullest extent of the law. But that does not bring Cornelius back, and that does not make this any less tragic.
And even more so that he had also lost his brother to the same kind of violence, which again is doubly, heartbreaking for the family. But to your point, Reese, and I think this has always been, a pet peeve of mine is an issue of civility or lack thereof in our community. And I can only think back of how many times at a social setting, maybe in the past 20 years, for me personally, that I spill a drink on someone. Not because I was drinking too much, but because I turned around too fast. And the first thing that comes out of my mouth is, brother or sister or whoever it happens to be that was on the receiving end of that accidental offense is, here's my email address. Here's my number. Send me your dry cleaning bill. I apologize. And you just keep it moving. And certainly seeing the at best disappointment, at worst anger, but you have to really diffuse these things. But Raul, these things are not, for some reason, they're not happening.
I believe that we have a convergence of different social symptoms creating these kinds of things, these kinds of situations. People are angry, road rage when you're behind the wheel, people kind of brushing past you as if to try to challenge you sometimes in the street, people getting into petty arguments over petty things, knowing full well that, life could be lost over that little nothing. So we are a society, and it's not just amongst people of color, it is happening all across this country, where people have short fuses and are very aggressive. Back in the 90s, I used to say, it's like people are in their own video and everybody else is an extra, and it's like, you're going to have to roll the way I move and get out of my way because I'm the star of the video. but it's gone past that now. It's just hyper anger, and the civility is out of the question. It's just gone. What we do as a society to turn that around, once again, I believe that it's got to be a long-term cultural shift. We're going to have to go back to some of the traditional values and how we raise our families, how we talk to one another, et cetera, et cetera. That takes time. I get it. Nobody's trying to hear that, but that's the reality, because this isn't going to get better. It's going to continue to get worse. There is, unfortunately, in my humble opinion, a greater lack of sensitivity to the loss of human life now than there was 20 years ago, than there was 20 years before that. And
or even the risk, or even not even the loss, but the risk of loss. And I think that's the thing that we try to teach children when they don't have, what is it, frontal lobe development or what have you. They don't realize the possibilities that, look, if you jump off the fence, you're going to hurt yourself. No, if you jump off the fence, you could get killed. But now, even as adults, these things are still happening. I want to move on to the big Prince George's County story. We've got a lot of politics happening. There is an acting Prince George's County executive now, the former CAO, Tara Jackson. She had a press conference today saying that she's just kind of going to have to, kind of toe the line until a new county executive is elected to finish out the term of now Senator-elect Angela also Brooks. But I want to talk about, I'll start with you, Curtis, what happened yesterday with the county council. They could not come to, they could not find 6 votes to elect a new council chair. Jolene Ivey will remain in that seat. There were some tensions. And listen, no matter who becomes county executive, unless it's with Sharon Baker, if he officially announces and were to win, there's still going to be special elections, and they're going to be expensive, Curtis. Talk to me about that. It's not going to be cheap one way or another.
Well, we probably won't have a new county executive, a permanent, if you will, county executive for another 3 months or so. The special election process, I believe the council is going to have to pass a resolution setting a special election date. Now, with regard to the division on the council, that's been there for a while. You have a progressive wing and a moderate conservative wing, and they just couldn't agree. Jolene Ivey, who's now by default is the new chairperson. She's of the more moderate wing. Ed Burrows, the new vice chairs of the progressive wing, along with Walla and some of the others. So politically, I think they're all Democrats. In some ways, they're on the same page, but there are some definite personality differences. And in terms of pushing things forward, like minimum wage, increasing that, they do have some serious policy differences. And I think if you think about it long term, some electoral politics are involved too, because Ivy obviously wants to be county executive. Calvin Hawkins wants to be county executive as well. So I think all of that perhaps played a part in it. So we'll see what happens.
But, and Reese, this is, if you pull out just a little bit, there are bigger issues. And when I say, bigger issues, I'm talking about big, like stadium size issues, big, like FBI building size issues in Prince George's County that Virginia lawmakers are pushing back on that decision that the new FBI building will be in Greenbelt. There's the issue about the possibility that Northwest Stadium will no longer be the home of the Washington Commanders. How politically the county needs stability to address these fights.
Yeah, I mean, we have big fish to fry, and special election after special election is very counterproductive. I really wish that now Senator-elect Alsa Brooks would not have resigned in the timing that has basically created the need for a special election. I understand that there were people who were saying that people wanted to choose the next special election. I, as a tax-paying resident of the high tax county, Prince George's County, I don't want to
say that again.
Listen, how many millions of dollars do we have to spend to play musical chairs with 3 people? It's so ridiculous. It's so wasteful. In my view, it's almost disqualifying for somebody like Jolene Ivy, who was already on the council, ran for a seat that we have to have a special election for her seat, and now she's running for Prince George's County executive, and which could potentially create another special election for her seat. That kind of reckless abandon for the taxpayer dollars, for me, is disqualifying. But at the end of the day, all these people running, except for, like you said, Rashawn Baker, would create a need for a special election. So this is just really ridiculous. I think it's an embarrassment to our county, when we should be, sitting in a place of pride of our former county executive now being the senator-elect. But they have to get their act together, because this is costing us too much money. And I don't think we're getting the return on our investment from playing musical chairs.
Raul?
I try to stay out of the political discussion in the county, because we lean more toward the lifestyle side with the magazine. But having covered the county for 20 years and recognizing that Reese's right, there's a certain amount of just leapfrogging going on with regard to these positions. And although I don't think we're at a tipping point yet, because it is a small, big town, Prince George's County. There are about 150 executive level leaders, managers, VIPs that are pretty much all in the same events and activities. We run into one another all the time. So it's the same group of people that are in leadership. And so people know who gets things done, who I can call that will pick up the phone and or return my call, make sure my needs are met. They will be polite to everyone, but they know who is actually the one they want to vote for, because that's the person who moves things forward for them. And I'm talking about common, residents, people who are just voters. But people do get a little antsy about this rotation that costs the money that they have to shell out when they're already paying higher taxes than they feel like they should be. There is a concern. I don't think we're at a tipping point yet, but at some point, this is not Upwork, right? At some point, people have to realize you ran for a position, people expect you to serve in that position. But again, at this moment, I believe that people are very comfortable and brand loyal to the leaders who they believe make things happen. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think Reese is on target, that there is a simmering that is happening right beneath the surface that is very real.
Let's talk real quick about some presidential politics. It looks like the president-elect, Donald Trump, is having a rocky start. Long before Inauguration Day, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz is out as his attorney general pick because of the allegations of sexual misconduct, allegations that he had sex with a minor, at a party. These are long-standing allegations, of course, which he has denied. Now we have Pete Hegseth, who his nomination as Secretary of Defense, in a lot of trouble. And Reese, you're in trouble when your mama goes on TV to defend you.
Well, I have to point out that 100% of the attacks from, or the oppo information on Hegseth comes from Republicans. The sexual assault allegation comes from a Republican woman who was at a Republican conference. He's denied it, but he did pay a settlement. The whistleblower report came from Republicans working for a Republican-funded veterans organization. This is a person that is too incompetent, or was too incompetent, to handle a slush fund for with 10 employees, who is now poised, if he were to be confirmed, to take over 47% of our discretionary spending in this country. It is absolutely outrageous that the Republican Party is so beholden to Donald Trump that he can pick the most incompetent bag of deplorables, I'm taking it back to Hillary Clinton, to serve in his cabinet, the least qualified people we have ever seen collectively put up for these positions. And there isn't hell being raised by Republicans. It just shows the chokehold that Trump has. And it shows that this Republican Party is going to be a rubber stamp on flushing our country down the toilet. And so he's not doing very well, Hegseth. He might not eke this one out. They're already looking at potentially Ron DeSantis, who, you know, these people are so bad they're putting up at first that the second person is almost a relief, even though they're also terrible. But it would be embarrassing if the twice impeached, 34 times convicted, 80-something times indicted Donald Trump actually had shame, but he doesn't. He's out here with concepts of a cabinet, winging it. And that's why this country is going to be in deep trouble come January, where he actually gets to take the full reins.
Let me ask you all real quick. I only have a minute left. I want to quickly pivot to the Joe Biden pardon of his son, Hunter. Curtis, real quick. A big deal, little deal. Do you care?
Yes, I care. He shouldn't have done it, but he's the president. He has that power to pardon people. I think Trump, when he gets in, will use that as somewhat cover when he's talked about the pardoning some of the January 6th insurrectionists. So he'll use that as a bit of a cover. So why can't I do this? Biden pardoned his son, a convicted felon. So it's disturbing.
Yeah.
But
Raul, big deal, little deal. Do you care? Real quick.
Real quick, I believe that Biden never should have said that he would not pardon his son in the first place. That's the mistake. In all honesty, I believe that Mr. Trump is very aggressive. He comes to the table to fight, to win. He doesn't do diplomacy. Mr. Biden, conversely, likes to do diplomacy. And this is where he made his mistake in everything he's done with regard to the MAGA movement, is to try to reason and kind of soft step things, when the reality is that the pardon position now is no longer just about mercy, which is what it started out as. It's about, I have the power to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what Mr. Trump made it when he said, I'll pardon myself. Yeah. So once it becomes that, then it, as a parent, you have this power to protect your child, you should use it. People expect that, because if you don't protect your own kid, how do we wonder whether you're going to protect the rest of us? So Biden has that responsibility.
I'm going to have to let that be the last word. I'm down on time, but thank you all so much.
Sorry, Reese.
For this engaging conversation. Reese Colbert, Raul Dennis, and Curtis Crutchfield, I appreciate your time. That is the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, December 4th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.